Hello everyone, today I wanted to take a look at the Dirtywave M8, specifically the tables function of the M8. I know a lot of people, when they get started with the device, they can be a little intimidated by the tables page. So I just wanted to go through, explain how it functions, give a couple of different use cases and examples how you might want to use tables, and hopefully after watching the video you'll feel a little less intimidated and more comfortable using them and experimenting them and messing with them in your own music. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I'm going to do my best to keep M8 within frame so you can see what my fingers are doing. I've gone ahead and made this project to illustrate some of the different concepts. And first we're going to take a look at this chain number 30 and phrase number 30. And you'll see that I've put just this one C5 note at the top of this phrase, triggering a seesaw. Cool, sounds amazing. So if we want to get to the tables page, we just go onto our instrument page, hit shift and right, and bam, we're on the tables screen. You can tell this by the top, it says table, and in the bottom right, in the mini map, you'll see that T highlighted, and that T stands for tables. So what are tables? Tables are basically a secondary sequencer that's going to run alongside of your main phrase whenever an instrument is triggered. Now, each instrument has its own table that corresponds with it. So this is instrument 30, and if I hit shift right and go to the table for that instrument, you'll notice that this is table 30. So these two, the table and the instrument, are interlinked. So when I hit play, you'll see the playhead on the table moving really, really quickly. And this is much faster than the phrase page. We can control the table's speed using this table tick value here on the instrument screen. By default, when you create a new instrument, it's going to come in with a table tick of 1. So what that means is with every tick, it's going to move to the next row of the table. If I set it to 3, every 3 ticks, it will move to the next row. Now, 3 ticks is going to be twice as fast as the phrase page. If you don't do anything fancy with the grooves, the M8 will run at, each step will occur every 6 ticks on the phrase page. So if I set the table tick to 6, it's going to run the exact same speed as the phrase itself. So you can make tables run as fast as 1 tick, or as slow as this FE setting, which is just about a little bit faster than 3 phrases before it's going to move to the next row. So that's really slow. There are 2 special speeds that I want to highlight really quickly before we move on. That is table tick 0, 0, which is labeled on the bottom as note increment. And what this does is it will move to the next line of the table every time a new note is triggered. So I can illustrate this a little more clearly if I put in some more notes with a little more rhythmic variety. So now when we go to the table page with table tick 0 and I hit play, watch what the playhead does and listen to when the notes are triggered. So with each new note, it moves to the next row every single time a note is triggered. I find myself using table tick 0 quite frequently. but we'll go more into that in a minute. The other special table speed is table Tic FF. And you'll see at the bottom, it says table speed 200 Hertz. What that means is that when you hold down a note, the table itself is going to loop and cycle 200 times per second. And obviously this is really fast. So if I hit play, you'll see the play head just going absolutely crazy. It's not even updating on the screen. It's not accurately represented on the screen with how fast it's moving. And this has can be used in a few kind of special ways that we'll also get into in a little bit. Okay, so far we've made the table move at different speeds, which isn't too terribly exciting. Let's get into actually having the table modify our sound. So I think the most illustrative way to use tables for a newcomer to them is to create an arpeggio or an arpeggiator using the table. So this very first column on the table, it's labeled N. That N stands for note offset. So each one of these values is going to be the amount that the note is transposed up or down relative to the note that is in the phrase page. So if I want to make a simple minor arpeggio, I can do 3 semitones for a minor third, 7 semitones for a perfect fifth, and then 12 semitones for an octave. I'll just copy and paste this down. And now when I hit play, it'll sound like this. So this is really handy. And then if you run the table really fast, it's running these arpeggios really fast, which is a common technique in chiptune music, which the M8 is really good at creating. So that's cool. Next to the note offset column, we have the volume column. And this is basically a percentage of volume of the velocity command in the phrase itself. So you can use this to kind of shape the volume and create kind of a volume envelope. So that can be handy. And then these next 3 rows they should look pretty familiar because they are the same 3 effects lanes or columns that you'll find in the phrase view. And just like the phrase view, if I hold down edit and hit up, I go into the command browser, and all of these commands are the same as they are in when you're trying to put an effect in the phrase view, with a couple caveats. Some of the commands behave slightly differently when you use them on the table. So if I hover over this chance command, you'll see in the help text, that last line, there's that table clarifier. So when you're throwing commands into your table and you're getting results that you're not expecting necessarily, go in and read these help texts, because anything in here that reacts differently or behaves differently on the table is going to have some kind of indicator in the help text here. Cool. So let's get to using some of these different effects. I've made a little synthesizer here with just these 2 notes on step 0 and step 6. Let's listen. So again, there's only 2 note events here, but you can hear these timbral changes happening basically every 16th note. And I'm achieving this by using the table. So here on effects column 2, I am modulating the timbre control of the macro synth. And on effects column 1, I'm modulating the amp amount. And because of how these notes lie rhythmically, there's an interesting relationship between when the table resets and where it loops. So if we watch closely, when I hit play, you can see when the second note is triggered, the playhead moves from B all the way back up to 0. Because that's where the second note is triggered as the table is progressing. And then when that second note is held down, it actually is held down for longer than the length of the table. So it loops back around to the top and you get that kind of extra timbre modulation here at the very tail end of that note. So you'd be able to achieve the same effect by using these commands in the phrase view, but you would have to load up all of these commands for each step. And depending upon the situation, if you want something to like loop the same way every single time, it's way more economical to put this sequence of commands in a table and just have it trigger every single time that your note triggers than pasting in all of those effects over and over again. Okay, awesome. So now I want to take a look at those two kind of special table speed values. First of which is table tick 0 or the note increment mode. The easiest way to illustrate this is with percussion instruments. So here I have this hi-hat loop. So, and you can see I'm not doing anything crazy on the phrase page here, but each one of these hits is very slightly different from one another if you listen closely. I'm not doing anything crazy with the sampler. This is just an open 606 hi-hat sound. But I have my table set to note increment mode, and I have these simple commands here. So now when I hit play, with each new note event, you'll see that it advances to the next row. So all I'm doing is changing the decay length of the volume envelope. So this makes it so the hi-hat hit is a little bit, all of the hi-hat hits are slightly different lengths. And then for this second FX column, I'm pitch shifting or detuning the sample very slightly for the first hit, and then it goes back to normal for the second hit and just repeats over and over again. So this just helps to make the loop sound a little bit more alive, and it prevents me from having to use a bunch of different samples like you would with like round robins. But it keeps it feeling a little more natural, less like I'm using just the same one shot over and over and over again, which technically I am, but through this modulation, it helps hide that a little bit. Now, if you've been paying close attention, you should have noticed that when I hit play, the playheads from effects column 1 and effects column 2 go out of sync with one another. And this is kind of a unique aspect of tables. You can, all of the effects lanes, they keep track of time independently of one another. I am achieving this by using these hop commands here. So basically all that does is once the play head hits that hop command, it jumps back up to the top because it's at hop 0, so it hops to row 0. And because these are two different lengths, it creates kind of an asymmetric loop situation. So the tuning, or the detuning of the sample combines with different delay or decay lengths as the table kind of progresses. And again, this is just slightly more economical than me writing out a bunch of different fine-tune commands and writing out a bunch of different decay lengths. Cool. So that's percussion. I use that very similar kind of processes for a lot of the different percussion sounds that I make, specifically kind of hats and like shakers and stuff like that. If you want a synthesis example, let's take a look at this on phrase 40. So again, I'm not doing anything too crazy on the phrase page. A lot of these notes are just C4, and they're all the same velocity. But if I dig into my table, you'll see I'm at table tic 0. I'm doing something similar here, another set of asymmetric loops. And all I'm doing here is moving the timbre and color controls for the macro synth. And because I'm using the wave map instrument, this is basically just changing the position or the coordinates in the wave table that we're using. And again, because these two columns are out of sync with one another, they combine in different ways as the loop progresses. And then for this first column over here, I have this pitch slide on the 4th step, as well as these different octaves every other step. And that just kind of keeps the loop varied enough and makes it feel a little more natural. An important thing to note here is that the note offset column and the volume column, their playhead is governed by the playhead of effects column 1. So when this playhead reaches hop 0 and jumps back to the top, that's exactly what happens on this playhead over here. If you wanted to apply this asymmetric looping technique to note offset and volume, you could do this. You would just have to put those commands in the effects columns themselves. You would have to use the volume command or the pitch command, PIT. So there's still a way to achieve that if you would like to. So when you combine these two ideas together, we get this. So hopefully you can hear how this enables us to be a lot more natural sounding. There's more variation between each note for the synthesizer as well as the hi-hats. And it keeps the loop from feeling stale. Like, this is all the same phrase, This is 4 copies of this 40 phrase, and the hi-hats you saw before are the same. But combining the tables idea with some chance commands and some nth commands, you can get this kind of like lightly generative pattern that keeps feeling new and keeps kind of progressing. It doesn't get as boring as quickly, in my opinion. Cool. So that is Table Tic 0. I also want to look at Table Tic FF. This isn't really one that I find myself using too often, but it is useful for a couple of different things. For this clap here, this is just a sound that comes loaded on your M8. So if you go into Instruments, Drums, it's this first clap sound right here. It says Table Tic FF right here. And basically what this is just an FM synth with all of the operators maxed out with feedback and level. And what that does is basically just creates noise. And that's running through a bandpass filter, a fairly resonant bandpass filter. And on the table page, you'll see this kind of mess. So what's happening on this screen? Basically, all we have is a bunch of these retrigger commands and repeat commands. So you see RET, REP, RET, RET, REP. And all this is doing is retriggering that burst of noise very slightly delayed from the initial onset because this table is moving so fast. Again, this is running at 200 hertz. And what that's trying to emulate is when you have a group of people clapping together, not everyone's going to land directly on the beat. You're going to have some people landing later, some people landing earlier, so you get this kind of flamming, and when there's enough people, you get that kind of big clap sound. And the table is approximating that by doing a bunch of bursts of noise to reflecting those individual hand claps. So yeah, that's the 200 hertz table tic setting. There are some other percussion instruments in here that come loaded on the M8 that you should look at to see how they're using the 200 hertz table. And if you have the Trash 80 drum preset pack, a bunch of these also use those really fast 200 hertz tables. So I encourage you to break those down yourselves and see how they work if you're interested in using those really fast tables. All right, awesome. So we have kind of gone through a bunch of the basics of the functionality of tables. If you wanted to stop right here and kind of go off and experiment, you've got enough material to do so. There's a few more advanced, in quotes, table techniques that I'm going to touch on now. It's nothing too difficult. They're just a little more conceptual to think about them a little bit more. So we've kind of talked about how we can move tables, different speeds, how we can use those tables to affect our instruments. But we can also jump between different tables. So if you notice, there's only the instruments column, or you can only go up to 7F instruments, but for tables, you can go all the way up to FF. So you have all those extra tables to use that you can reference at any point in your sequence. And you can do this by using the command TBL, or table. So for this instrument, it's instrument 50. If I hit right, it's table tic 3. Hit right, it just has this one amp command on it. And what that does is kind of on those off 16th notes, makes it a little more distorted. But for this last hit, I have it jump to table 0. So if I hit play, you'll notice you don't hear that off 16th note on step 5. So if I were to delete this table command, you hear it, and then you don't. So you can use this command to jump to any table, and it can be referenced by another instrument. It doesn't matter. So if I use table 30, it will reference that arpeggiator that we made earlier. So if I hit play now, cool. And a little navigation thing. If you hover over either the table command or the number and you hit shift right, it jumps to whatever table is listed there. So like this is 30, hit shift right, it goes to table 30. Whereas if I'm up here and I hit shift right, it goes to table 50. It's just a handy navigation thing, making editing these doable. And when you're dealing with tables that are above 7F, this is the only way to get to them at all. Now, when you use this table command, the table speed is going to be determined by whatever the table tick for that instrument is. So if I change this table tick speed to 1, it makes table 30's arpeggiator run faster. If I go back to this instrument 30, you'll see that it's 3 here. But when I play it on this page, when it's referencing instrument 50, it runs at instrument 50's table speed, which is 1 here. I change it back to 3, and now it's going to behave the same way as it did when it was on the first arpeggiator. But you can actually override this. So if I wanted those offbeat amp modulators or modulations, but I wanted this arpeggiator to run really fast, all I would have to do is go into this table here and use a Tic command. So what this will do is set the tick speed, or the speed for this column. So not only can you get your individual FX columns to be out of sync with each other at the same speed, but you can actually run them all at different rates by using this command. So you can kind of deepen that asynchronous looping technique that we were talking about earlier by doing something like this, if you were inclined to do so. Now, a neat feature of the Tic command when you're using it on the table specifically is the table will actually look for a Tic command in this bottom row before it starts playing. And this is really useful because this first step can be like high value real estate in the effects commands you'll find after you work with tables for a while. So if I hit play now, it's still running that first column at table tick 1. But this doesn't work if I put it somewhere in the middle of the column. It only makes the table run faster, that specific column on the table run faster once it hits that command. But if I put it back down here, it runs really fast from the beginning. So this can be useful when you are setting up your tables and you have tables that you want to be referenced by multiple instruments. So defining their speed at the bottom like this. Like I always want this table to run at 1, no matter which instrument references it. So if I have it set like this, and then I go back to phrase 30 and I play it, it's still going to be really fast. Despite the fact that the table tick on instrument 30 is 3. So that's just something to keep in mind if you want to use it. Okay, cool. So we can jump around between tables, but there's also one kind of crazy new feature. I think this was added in the 3.0 firmware update. Now we can run an additional table in parallel with our first table. So this is using the TBX command, which is the aux table, or auxiliary table. What this will allow us to do is run 2 tables at the same time, basically. So now I am running that arpeggiator at the same time as our little distortion sequencer. This is really cool. It basically gives you another 3 lanes of effects commands you can use. It can be a little weird to work with because of how it's set up, but it can be useful if you find yourself needing more effects commands. A couple things to note with regards to the speed of aux tables. They default to 6 ticks. So if you listen to this arpeggiator, it's running, the note is only changing every step of the phrase. So it is running by default at the same speed as your phrase. So 6 ticks in this instance. I can obviously change that by using a tick command here. But you can get kind of crazy interactions like you can sort of hear here. We have 2, once it gets down to this row, we have 2 table 30s running at the same time. You can hear that additional octave and all of those different notes transposing on top of each other. So you can get some cool interactions that way. And if you want to stop an aux table for whatever reason, you just call TBX 0 and that'll stop this. So it stops arpeggiating when it hits this note. Make this a little more obvious. Oops. So that about covers it for tables, at least the stuff that I wanted to hit. This should get you well on your way to using them. I'd be interested to see what kinds of features you're able to come up with using tables. So feel free to share, and definitely ask any questions that you may have. I'd also point you in the direction of the Dirtywave M8 Discord. There's a lot of people over there who are really eager and helpful to any questions that anyone has. But yeah, thank you all for watching. Hopefully this was helpful, and yeah, go out there and make some cool tunes. Later.